Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 111th episode of Dragon Quest Slime Time, a Dragon's Den podcast. This is one of your hosts, Pendy.
And this is Paul, also known as EastX Twitch.
Today, we are going to talk about the Emblem of Roto manga.
Wait, the what? I thought it was called something else.
Oh, that's right. That's the Japanese name for it. Looks like I'll need to put my translating and localizing skills to the test.
I don't think that's a good idea. Do you have any background in translating and localizing?
Not really. I'm just going to wing it. How about the Token of Loto?
No, these aren't the old days of Dragon Warrior on the Game Boy Color anymore.
How about the Shiny Thingamabobber of Eldic?
No way, that's too much thingamabobber. Holy Rubus, you are awful at this. How about we bring in some professionals?
It's probably for the best. How about we bring in Christina Rose and Jennifer Sherman?
Perfect. What do our two guests think it should be called?
You know, stop me if I'm being too bold with this, but maybe Mark of Erdrick?
Yeah, trust us on this. It makes a lot of sense.
So much better. And it's no coincidence that Jennifer is the editor and Christina is the official translator for the Mark of Erdrick manga. Dragon Quest, the Mark of Erdrick Volume 1 will officially drop on September 23rd, the same day this episode premieres.
EastX and I were lucky enough to get it early through the Square Enix pop-up shop in Los Angeles. The shop was open August 8th through 7th September. So sorry everyone, it is now shut down for now.
It sure was nice visiting Los Angeles in person like we totally did. We should do that more often, in fact. Anyway, welcome to the show, Christina Rose and Jennifer Sherman.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
As we do with any new guest, we will get to know their love of Dragon Quest first.
Okay, guys, how did you first get into Dragon Quest? Christina.
Hi, Christina here. Okay, so I always liked RPGs as a kid, and I played the NES as a kid. My options there were basically Final Fantasy or Dragon Warrior. I owned Final Fantasy, and I rented Dragon Warrior games a whole lot.
That's cool stuff. And what about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, sort of similar to Christina. I also played Dragon Warrior on the NES. I was kind of too little to understand it at the time, but I remember, holding the NES controller and beating a slime and being so excited. Yeah, and the rest is history.
Ah, very nice. So, Jennifer, we'll go back to you. What is your favorite Dragon Quest mainline game?
I have to go with Dragon Quest 11. It turned out so nice. I love the storylines of the characters, and I really like the localization. I really love pretty much everything about that game.
Oh, I don't blame you. It quickly became one of my top 3 when it came to Dragon Quest games myself. How about you, Christina?
I will always have a soft spot for Dragon Quest IV. That was the one that I really latched onto as a kid. So, back in those days, you were expected to flesh out the playable characters yourself. You make them, you name them, their personality is what you decide it is. So, it was a really big change playing Dragon Warrior 4 and seeing characters with predefined personalities.
Oh, good point.
This was before I played FF4 as well, of course.
Dragon Quest has a lot of spin-off games. My favorite's Rocket Slime. What about you, Christina?
I really like Dragon Quest Tact. It gives so much personality to the monsters.
Oh, that's a good choice. I played that religiously for the whole time it was open. We actually had a podcast that the reason me and Paul do this podcast in terms of All Trades Abbey, the other podcast that we do, is because of Tact, because we wanted to talk more about it, and we were both on the same guild. That was such a fun game while we had it.
That's great. I'm pretty sure that I burned through the touch detection on my phone by running an auto-tapping script to just run battle roads while I slept.
That's funny.
And I know Pendy and I both racked up a ton of debt.
We don't talk about how much money we had to spend on that game. Not that we had to, but what we decided we wanted to.
That's why I'm afraid to play the new one they're going to announce.
I know, right? What about you, Jennifer?
Well, I haven't played as many of the spin-offs as I'd like to. I will take what you said as a recommendation, maybe. I'm also curious what this new one they're teasing now and they're going to announce as of this recording tomorrow. Interested to see what that'll be. But yeah, if you have any more recommendations. let me know.
Oh, definitely Rocket Slime, like Paul mentioned. That's one of the best side games I think that we ever got to see. That was such a fun game.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yes, and I think Treasures is really good too. It's slightly an acquired taste, but I think it's just really fun if you like exploring and climbing around a lot in games.
A lot of good references to the series, of course, too, since you're finding treasures from Dragon Quest. But yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to monsters, what is each of your favorite Dragon Quest monsters? Jennifer, we'll start with you with that.
This is probably a basic take, but I like the liquid metal slime. I like any of the metal slimes, really. I don't know. There's just something about them. They're cool because they're metal, and they're cute and weird because they're slimes. I just have a soft spot for them.
That is a wonderful take.
It really is. What about you, Christina?
I also like a metal enemy. I like the Hunter mech from
Ooh,
2. And I'm also a fan of the Hammerhood. I just bought a die-cast one at PAX recently.
nice.
That's rad. And who is your favorite Dragon Quest character, Christina?
So for me, it's Princess Alina in Dragon Quest IV. So one of my favorite moments of characterization in any video game is when you're playing as Alina in Chapter 2 and you're just talking to NPCs and they tell you that you knocked a hole in the wall of your royal chambers that they have to board up now. So you go to your room after it's fixed and check the boarded up hole, and the narration tells you it seems the wall, repaired with flimsy boards, can be broken through by kicking. Do you want to kick it? Yes, no. Like, this is all without Alina saying a single word herself. This narration tells you exactly what her thought process is. And it's incredible.
Yeah, that's quite a humorous moment in the game.
And I love how in Dragon Quest Treasures, that was one of the treasures you could find was the boarded up wall.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that is cool. I didn't notice that.
Oh yeah.
And Jennifer, do you have a favorite character?
Well, since I mentioned 11 as my favorite in the main series, I'll stick with a character from that. I really like Jade. She's just a cool warrior woman, martial artist, doesn't take any nonsense, and can kind of fend for herself. I always like those types of characters.
Oh, that's very nice. She's one of my favorite characters in the game too. I like the whole cast of characters in 11, but she's one of the characters I bought one of those figures that they made for her in Japan, which is very
Ooh.
nice.
Cool. Yeah, there's so many nice characters and the figures. I want some of those too.
Yeah, they're great. Now, for both of you, what is your favorite Dragon Quest game mechanic, such as casinos, job classes, monster collecting, arena fights, etc.? Jennifer, we'll go back to you on that.
Since I also grew up on games like Pokemon, I have to go with monster collecting. That really, hits the nostalgia factor for me. I always like collecting monsters.
Nice. And I was glad they were able to do that recently for the new Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D. I loved how you were able to go out and get monsters for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Christina?
Same thing, honestly. I like the recruiting monsters in 5, and that is both because I like using them in the party and because I just like seeing what names they get in the English. Like, you get golems named Mason or a mudraker named Clayton. It's fun.
Oh yeah, Mason was also one of my main characters I used throughout that game. He was so useful. I had him once I got him in the game. He was in my final party all the way through the final boss in 5.
Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah.
Right on. Are there any previous Dragon Quest games you haven't played that you would like to play? For me, it's 9 and 10. Christina?
So I have a dark secret, and my dark secret is that I still haven't finished Dragon Quest 11.
Uh-oh.
And I keep starting it, and then for some reason, I fall off of it for like IRL reasons, and then by the time I get back to it, I forget what I was doing, and I just want to start over again.
Well, don't feel too bad. I'm in the same boat. Like, I totally love the game, but I have never finished it. I've really got to work on that.
It's pretty long too.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's so long. I mean, that's the main reason why.
There's some I haven't played too. I'm right now that they just announced the 7 reimagined, I'm really looking forward to playing that and have an excuse to play 7 in a different way. That looks really cool.
Me
Um,
too.
yeah. I I have played the original, obviously, but I'm still looking forward to the second set of HD 2D games too. Those are so pretty to me.
They are.
Definitely.
Oh no, I agree. And it was so unexpected that we got 7, even though there was that leak out there, which we actually did an entire episode saying like, this has got to be fake, and it turned out to be real. But
At least we did it. We got ahead of it, man.
So convinced that was fake, and people were just, high on copium, But wow.
Copium and hopium.
In our defense, that source was not reputable at the time, so we had no reason to believe them.
Yeah, they were saying things like, "Oh yeah, they're going to do a remake just like they did for Dragon Quest IV HD 2D," which of course does not exist right now. So they had all sorts of errors and red flags in the article that they had, but it turned out to be true. We thought it would be something else like 436 or we were hoping for 9 because 9 doesn't have a remake yet, but
Oh,
that's
man.
okay. 7's a great game and I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, the more Dragon Quest, the merrier.
So, for our viewers, Christina and I actually go way back. I used to run the Dragon Quest News Network website in the early 2000s. There was an editorial section called the Imperial Scrolls of Brainwave. It was a creative editorial column of sorts. It was run by a person that went by Brainwave, later known as Saccone. He took a leave of absence for a little bit, and Christina actually took over for a few columns. Now, do you remember how that came about at all? Or is your memory a little fuzzy on all that?
I literally do not remember any of that. Like, you linked me to those old articles, and I looked
Mhm.
at them, and I was like, was someone impersonating me? That is how little I remember them. But no, after I looked through the text, I was like, yeah, this looks like something I might have written in the early 2000s. And then I died of cringe.
No, I don't blame you. I remember writing some things back in the day for that website myself, where I was like, "Oh, did I really write that?" Because that was when that was when I started that website, or actually continued that website from somebody else. I was like 20, and it was right before I joined the military. So yeah, there were some cringy things I wrote as well. So
We've
we're all
had
in that
busy lives
together.
since then.
Exactly.
Past selves being cringy. What? That would never happen.
Exactly.
I envy you.
I'm currently very cringy, so I got nothing to
Oh,
lose.
oh, I'm sorry. Couldn't be me.
No, if this podcast has taught me anything, I still haven't got rid of all my cringe for sure. So that's okay. Just gotta embrace it and go with it sometimes. So next, let's get into how both of you became what you are today. We'll start with Christina. What inspired you to learn Japanese? Was it self-taught? Did you go to school for it? How did that come about?
Okay, so there were two big drivers that made me want to learn to read Japanese. I've mentioned it briefly in my own social media, but when I was a high schooler, I first got acquainted with the local comic store. They let me browse their Diamond Publishing catalog and check out all the import stuff in the back. And I saw Dragon Quest manga back there. And this was in the 90s when there was a giant Dragon Quest drought in English, and I hadn't seen anything about this series since the NES era. I only knew it was called Dragon Quest because they mentioned it in the credits because I beat one of the games. I was like, ooh, that looks neat. I'll buy some of that. I ended up getting The Adventure of Dai and Emblem of Roto that way. I really got into reading Emblem of Roto, and I wanted to, learn to parse the text so that I could do more than look at the visual images, right? I started teaching myself to read with, online teachings, printouts, resources. And then from there, I went to college and studied it seriously and got a degree in it.
Oh, very nice. And I'm shocked that your import store had those titles back then too. That's really nice.
It was the Diamond Publishing catalog. They
Oh,
had a section where they had like imported tankobons from popular manga labels at the time in Japan, and they were
okay.
rerunning Emblem of Roto at the
Hmm,
time. So I was able to order one book a month for a while. It was pretty nice, actually.
very cool.
As we all know, editors are awesome. Jennifer, how'd you get into editing?
Well, that's funny because I never really planned to. Like, I never tried to become an editor. It just sort of happened. I mean, in terms of localization editing, like, you could say I always had an interest in games and later had an interest in anime, so that kind of fueled this. I studied Japanese in college, as you do. Right when I was graduating from college, I started working for the website Anime News Network. So speaking of websites that end in News Network, um, yeah, so I started writing about anime, games, manga, and editing some other people's articles as well. And that's how I really started to learn different style guides and, all the nitty-gritty stuff of editing. Yeah, and I just build on it after that.
Nice. Now, Christina, your journey from fan to professional is fascinating to us. You had done some English fan translations for the Super Robot Wars games in the past, games that I'm now a fan of since they've been in English. Years later, you were part of the official English translation team for some of the Super Robot Wars games on the PS4. How did you go from fan translating the series to being paid to do it officially?
Okay, so to be clear, I was already a professional by the time I landed the Super Robot Wars gig doing it professionally.
Gotcha.
I had graduated college, I was taking freelance odd jobs, and mostly working on Otome games when that arrangement fell into place. So, back in my fandom days, I did a lot of networking with ROM hackers and other translators that you just talk to a lot of people when you're in that field. And a lot of those people eventually go pro. One of those people is Jason Moses, who worked on Super Robot Wars J.
Mm.
He had a colleague in his own professional work who knew a PM, a project manager at Rubicon Solutions, a translation agency. That PM had the SRW project land in his lap when his agency got that project from Bandai Namco Southeast Asia. So he reached out to his contacts to see if anyone knew someone familiar with this series. And friend of a friend got back to Jason, and then Jason immediately reached out to me because he knew I was a pro and would be interested in this. So I jumped on board immediately, and Jason and I continue to work together to this day. I do hate to say that opportunities are about who you know, but unfortunately, the reality is that the translation industry is opaque, and that is a fact of life. Companies don't publicly announce projects. They do not take applications from new translators interested in working on new projects. Project managers reach out privately to people who are already in their contacts. Fan background is a small part of this. If I wasn't already a pro when that call went out, I would not have gotten that job.
No, that makes sense. And that's true of many different professions. That's why networking, like you ended up doing for that, the translating that you've done before, is super important. And that's true of just about any job, being able to network like that in whatever you do.
Absolutely. But yes, it's extremely lucky.
Jennifer, how did you eventually come to be an editor for Square Enix manga titles?
Well, to continue my little timeline, I guess, I was working at Anime News Network, and eventually I got on the JET program, which is the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. So I lived in Japan for 4 years, rural place. If anybody wants to talk about the JET program with me, happy to do that too. So, that basically helped me with my language and Japanese culture skills. After 4 years, I came back to the US and continued working for ANN for a while. Eventually, cold emailed some publishers that I knew because I wrote articles on them for ANN. And I started freelance editing for Kodansha Comics and J Novel Club. And then I got my first in-house job at Viz Media. And then I got my current in-house job at Square Enix Manga and Books. So that's that.
I'd heard that when you were at Viz, you had actually worked on Die a little bit too. Is that true?
Yeah, I worked on that original, the first arc of Dragon Quest, The Adventure of Dai at Viz, and that was an exciting project too. So I have kind of built on that experience to do this one now. So
Yeah, and that's amazing. We were talking about this offline, but I thought it was so fun that you ended up working on Die, then went from Viz to Square Enix, and now you're working on the Mark of Erdrick. That's amazing how you went from one Dragon Quest title to another, but for different companies.
yep, they can't get rid of me. They tried. I'm still working on Dragon Quest.
I'm familiar with Jet. I considered enrolling, which I hear is highly competitive, but I didn't have,
Awesome.
yeah, I didn't have a degree at the time. And when I got my degree, I just went in a different direction.
Yeah. the degree is the main, requirement. So, yep. If anybody wants to find me and talk about that, happy to discuss.
That's great. So, Christina, what are some other titles you've translated for, whether it be manga, anime, or video games?
So we talked about Super Robot Wars, of course. I've worked
Mhm.
on Super Robot Wars 30, X, T, and most recently Y. I was more of a lead checker on Y than a translator, but I still do oversee projects for that. I've worked on several Toho games. Goyoku Ibun is an official title that came out like last year. There's several derivative games I've worked on, like Azure Reflections, Genso Skydrift, Lotus Labyrinth R, and most recently, Fantasy Maiden Wars, which is coming out October 20th, which is an intersection of Toho and Super Robot Wars. My main bread and butter day job is mobile games that I can't name. And other than that, I handle a few serial manga titles. The one I like to talk the most about is Uncle from Another World, which is a story of a Sega nerd who spends 17 years in an isekai, makes it back home, and now spends his time sharing flashbacks with his nephew to talk about his isekai life.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one because it has an anime adaptation now as well.
It does, and it's really funny. Like, this is not a guy who coasts through life being overpowered and gets all the girls. Like, he is a complete social failure who keeps trying to apply Sega lessons to things where Sega lessons do not even remotely apply.
It's like, hey, you just got to go faster like Sonic, you know?
No, like, he'll try to kite enemies into pits like in Golden Axe, and then the enemies will just walk normally around the pit.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I've been interested in checking that series out, so sounds good.
Highly recommended.
Jennifer, what are some of the other titles you've been an editor for now or in the past?
Okay, yeah. At my current job, Square Enix Manga and Books, I've worked on titles like Just Like Mona Lisa, Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You, Final Fantasy, Eorzea Academy manga, Near Replicant novels, The Apothecary Diaries novels, print edition, which is exciting because there's an ongoing anime of that series. And one of my series that's closest to my heart is A Man and His Cat. I took over editing that partway through the series, but it's such a sweet story of what the title says, A Man and His Cat, and it's really about people and animals recovering from trauma together, and it's like totally musical theming because the main character is a pianist and there's younger characters who have like a rock band. It's just so fun and so sweet and so many cats.
Okay.
Kanda, he's like a legendary pianist in Japan, and he has kind of a traumatic event, and suddenly he can't perform anymore. He kind of loses his way in life, and then he goes and adopts a cat, and everything starts getting better from there, and he starts to work on himself. And the cat also kind of has his own trauma, so it's just really sweet to watch them bond together.
Oh, that's nice. I'm looking forward to reading the Apothecary Diary novels because I'm a huge fan of the anime. I'm all caught up with both seasons that's been put out so far. So I'm very interested to see how the books are too, or the light novels, or whatever they are.
Yeah, the light novels are, the original source for the manga and the anime, of course. So, yeah, if you want to know where the story goes, just pick up the novels, basically. We're pretty far in the series, and the series is still going strong, so.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. This is a question for both of you. What are the greatest difficulties about localizing a manga title from Japanese to English? Now, to break it down a little bit, for Christina, this is more translation specific, and for Jennifer, this is more about the editing process. So why don't you tell us first, Christina?
So, challenges can vary depending on the project. For games, the biggest challenge for me is making sure to keep character voices consistent across multiple team members' work. Different people instinctively default to different linguistic registers. So, three people can write the same character and have the person come out sounding three different ways. And it's a challenge to keep all of that unified and make it sound right. In manga, it's different. Projects typically have one translator, and the biggest challenge there is keeping a robust glossary of terms and notes. because it's easy to keep track of things while you're working on it. But what about when the next volume comes out 9 months from now and it alludes to something from 9 months ago? Are you even going to remember that? No. No, you're not.
I have seen that before because I'm reading another Square Enix title, which I won't name, but it mentions Artnia, which is in Japan, the place where you can get the slime pancakes and a lot of merchandise for Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, and whatnot. And sometimes they would spell it correctly. And usually those were chapters where you actually see a picture of the Artnia building where the name is plastered on it in the volume. But then you went to another chapter where they just kind of name it offhand and there's no picture of it, then they would use a different letter. Instead of Artnia, it'd be Altnia. The L and the R
Oh,
issue
yeah.
that you have with Japanese to English and vice versa.
Yeah, you have to be very fastidious about glossaries to avoid pitfalls like that.
Exactly.
Indeed. And we podcast reviewer guys, we love to pounce on those mistakes, man.
Oh, yeah.
And Jennifer, can you tell us about your challenges in the editing process?
Well, some of it is going to be the same as what Christina or the translators deal with because, as editors, we're closely working with the words too, the Japanese. And at least at our imprint, all of us editors, we know Japanese too, so we're always sort of going back and checking things. And to go back to what Christina said, I tend to like working on complete series because that way you know where everything's going and you don't have to worry about what's going to reference what later. You have the whole picture and you don't worry about making a mistake about a term because the whole series is done. So
Must be nice.
that's why, a series like the Mark of Erdrick is also nice because it's complete and we know exactly where it's going to go. But apart from that, every publisher operates differently, but editors also end up more like a kind of project manager. So really we do like many, many more tasks than we do editing. Everything from hiring the freelancers and, making sure they get paid and kind of guiding the design process and talking about acquisitions and so many emails, so many different things. For me, it's often like more the behind the scenes stuff that gets really complicated, and some of that stuff is more like energy sucking than the actual editing, the actual working on the book sometimes. For this book, this series and this volume especially, I will mention we went through some hurdles to get this thing out there. It was quite a journey. Jumped through more than hoops, some rings of fire maybe. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that readers aren't gonna to see, but it's amazing to see this all come together because sometimes you feel like you're not sure if you're gonna make it. So it's great when it finally comes together and your little baby is out there.
No, that makes sense. And I'm glad we're able to talk to you about all of this because I was very ignorant of what an editor really did in a series like this. For example, you talked about knowing Japanese. Didn't even realize that an editor for titles like this would know Japanese as well. I just figured, oh, the translator knows, and they just see what the translator does and make sure all the grammar is good or they're using the right terms or whatnot. But there's so much more to that. And then you have the language component as well. So it's really nice to hear all that.
Yeah, it all depends on the publisher. Some
Hmm.
publishers don't require their editors to know Japanese, but
Ah,
I think it's really valuable for us to know that for sure. So
yeah.
yeah.
I can interject here and say Sega actually tries to have English editors as opposed to bilingual editors, just to have there are merits to that. Like there are merits to both sides. When you're bilingual as an editor, you can catch things.
Mm.
Like if a translator misses something, you can sometimes catch those details that the translator miss. But when you bring in someone who's monolingual English, like that brings a different perspective, someone who is not feeling as beholden to the original sentence structure and who may come up with more natural instinctive ways of representing the text.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. And it's like sometimes being influenced by both Japanese and English, you sort of get Japanese English in your head sometimes too, and you start to
Hmm.
question what sounds really natural. So
For
yeah,
sure.
it's a complicated and sometimes confusing thing.
Oh, that all makes sense. So now we'll get into the Mark of Erdrick. This was a Dragon Quest manga that originally ran from 1991 to 1997 in Japan. It stars Eris, a descendant of Erdrick, in the years after the end of Dragon Quest III. How did both of you end up working on the title? Jennifer as the editor, of course, and Christina as the translator. Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Okay, do you mind if I sort of meander my way to the response? Because I would love to give a little bit more background on this series too. Tell a little bit more about what it's about. Is that okay?
No, we would love to hear that.
Okay. So bear with me, I will get to your actual question. To tell what this story is a little bit more first, it takes place about 100 years after Dragon Quest III, and it starts by explaining how, the actual Mark of Erdrick is passed down. There are many years of peace, and then we are in the Kingdom of Carmen, and it's infiltrated by the forces of the Dragon Lord. Poor Prince Ars is about to be born into this kingdom that's basically under siege, and Luna Freya, the daughter of a commander from the Carmen army, she's a warrior too. She has to flee with this newborn baby prince to save his life and find sanctuary for them. They live in this kind of, hidden place for about 10 years, and Luna Freya, teaches Ars and another boy, Kira, swordsmanship and kind of some battle skills, and raises them along with a few other people from the kingdom. Of course, eventually the Dragon Lord finds their hideout again. They have to flee again. Of course, a dragon comes along at one point, but Aris and Kira end up finding a really amazing mentor, and the prince starts on his journey to become a true hero. So after that, Aris continues, building his party, gaining friends so that he can take on the Dragon Lord, the Dragon Lord's master. There's really great characters in this story and some really, really amazing art by Kamui Fujiwara, especially in some of the later volumes, honestly, as I was flipping through. I just sort of would gasp at the art. It's just amazing. And for this specific edition, I wanted to mention that the original is from 91 to 97. However, the release we're doing is the perfect edition, which came out in Japan 2006, 2007. So, unlike the first volume, this release is 15 volumes, and they're kind of like 1.5 or maybe closer to 2 for some volumes, 1.5 and 1 type thing. They have a lot of bonus content like concept art and sketches, and there's color manga pages as well as other color bonus art, which is always really cool for me to page through. I always see one I somehow didn't notice before when I'm flipping through these. Especially in the volumes 14 and 15, there's just a ton of bonus content, like over 100 pages in a couple of those volumes, I think.
I know what you're talking about. I've read through the entire first volume, and the color pages are great, and all the different bonus artwork that's in there that came along with the Perfect Edition. And you can tell that these are much thicker than your normal volumes, because some people were saying, well, how come the price is more than what I'd usually expect? And that's because you get more pages. They're a lot thicker than a typical
Yeah.
volume that you would see.
Yeah, and our physical release is it's really special too. Obviously, this is audio, so nobody can see it right now, but it's like shiny but has matte lamb on the characters on the cover, and whereas the original Japanese version has more or less nothing on the back cover, on our version we filled it up with everything, of course, describing the story and pulling art panels from inside the manga as well as character art to put on the back. But my favorite thing is that we got approved to use continuous spine art. So this is going to be a really cool display piece when people line them up on their shelves. all 15 volumes, because it'll, on the spine, you'll have a continuous art with all the characters, which is really special. And that's not on the original Japanese Perfect Edition. That's just on what we decided to do for our version of the Perfect Edition. So
Yeah, I love when manga does that.
yeah.
It's great.
Good decision. And I'm glad you guys are doing it as opposed to Viz, because like your exterior graphic design is better than theirs would be, so I think it looks
Yeah,
really
and
good.
speaking of the design, I wanted to shout out Phil Balsman. He was the one who, designed the cover. He does really great work. So yeah, I can't wait for everybody to see this book. And I will get to your actual question now. So it was like kind of a meandering path how we ended up doing this book as an imprint. Can't really get into the licensing details, but for me, as I had worked on The Adventure of Dai before, it was natural for me to work on this, and I, provided a little bit of insight into what working on the previous series was like. So that helped, in some sense, shape this project as we were taking it on. So, and I just really like an old series that somebody never thought would be licensed. So that's part of what excited me about this.
That's great to hear. What about you, Christina? How did you get brought onto the project?
So, Jennifer and I have a mutual friend at Square Enix Manga and Books, a manga editor named Sarah Tangney. Sarah and I connected separately years ago as colleagues with otome game backgrounds. Like, I was an otome game translator, she was an editor and reviewer of them. And so we knew each other, and she knew I was a big Dragon Quest fan. And in addition to this, pretty much every time I make a new connection at a manga publisher, I always make sure to tell the person that I'm connecting with, hey, if your publisher ever licenses Emblem of Roto, please hit me up. I'm right here. I promise. So I have made sure to lay groundwork for this everywhere I could, because this was a dream project for me. This was a thing on my bucket list. So when Jennifer here got the project, Sarah heard about it from her and passed my info along to Jennifer, and Jennifer could probably tell you more about that. But she put us in touch. The ball got rolling from
Yeah, it
there.
was so funny. We don't normally have like somebody, like sometimes we have an idea of who we want to hire as freelancers, but we don't necessarily think, yes, I have to have this person. But as soon as we knew we were going to do this series, Sarah was like, I know who you have to hire to translate this. You have to talk to Christina. So I was like, oh, okay, I will take that advice then. And it turns out Christina is obviously the perfect person for this. Such an, OG fan with such a history with this series. It was amazing to find somebody like that for this project. And just to quickly mention, the letterer is also an amazing freelancer we have for this series. Steve Dutro is a legendary letterer. He's got a couple decades of experience.
I've been very impressed with his work so far from what I've seen in Volume 1. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
he was also originally worked on that first arc of The Adventure of Dai, so I knew I wanted to bring him on for
Oh.
something like this too. He's does amazing work, and yeah, could not have found a better team all around for this.
It's not necessarily, you don't have to have someone that's a huge fan of a title to work on something like this, but when you hear that someone is a huge fan of the source material and they're working on it, it's always so fun to hear that. I'm always excited to hear that, oh, this person is helping bringing the game over in English, and they happen to also be a huge Dragon Quest fan on top of that. It's great to hear that.
Yeah, and I think with a franchise like this, where fans enjoy the history of it so much, that the extra authenticity you can get by having that is well worth it.
Mm.
Christina, you called Mark of Erdrick a dream project. You must have been super excited to get this job as a Dragon Quest fan. So, how much of the series had you read prior to getting the job?
I was, in fact, ecstatic. I had read the full original series. So, the way the series works initially is it was a set of 21 volumes, tankobon in Japanese. And then after that was an interstitial volume called Emblem of Roto Returns. and that had a set of side stories that sort of acted as connective tissue. And then after that came a sequel series called To the Inheritors of the Emblem. And that one ran on for like, I want to say like 33, 34 volumes. Yeah, 34 volumes seems right. And that I have read all of it extensively.
That's awesome, and that's so many volumes.
It is a lot. For the record, I counted the first two original tankobon. This volume 2 ends at chapter 7. Volume 1 of this perfect edition ends at chapter 6. So it's basically like 1.8 original volumes.
Gives us a lot to read at once, and I enjoy that.
It does.
We both give him a Dragon Quest Bible of names. We noticed that all the spell and monster names used in the manga are accurate to the current English game adaptations. Christina?
I can say yes, Square Enix is pretty good about providing up to date term bases. Term base is the term we use for this in game translation. They do provide a thorough glossary, usually with proper capitalization, also covered. And I also took it upon myself to play through Dragon Quest III HD 2D just on my own time to make sure that I was on top of every detail.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, it give you a refresher and see what they're doing, and especially since the two titles tie into each other. Of course, that makes a lot of
Exactly.
And what was your experience with that, Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, basically, just what Christina said. Kind of a guiding principle for a project like this is going to be to keep things consistent with the existing localization, the games, in this case, the most recent games, including the HD2D. I also was playing that as I was starting working on this series. There's actually a point in the first volume where there's a scene like exactly taken from the games or Dragon Quest 3, and I wanted to make sure that was like perfectly matching what was in that game dialogue. So yeah, we've been able to reference it and keep things consistent the whole way with that, which is great.
Very nice. So speaking of names, I am absolutely horrible with pronouncing them. I have a reputation for it on this podcast, in fact, and maybe Christina can help us out with some of them. So how are you supposed to pronounce some of these names from the Mark of Erdrick? Jagan, Jagan, Beast Lord, no, Non, Lord Imagine? How do you pronounce those?
Okay. So Jagan is just accent on the first syllable. Jagan. Ganon has a hard G. So that is
Ah,
Ganon, not non.
got it.
And imagine is just the word imagine.
Oh, that threw me off. I was like, is it really Imagine?
Yeah. Japanese
Nice.
is just imagine.
It's
Okay.
funny because I sort of pronounce it slightly differently. Like I kind of combine closer to the Japanese and the English word, which they might have been going for. I kind of say like Imogene. So I don't know. Maybe the takeaway is partly that no one's going to send pronunciation police after you either. Um,
We are not going to send someone to your house.
until we get an anime adaptation. Come on, Square Enix, we can do it. Let's
I
go
mean, there
for it.
was one in '96. It was just a little.
Oh, that's right. There's the little movie
Yeah.
that they did.
Oh yeah, I have a VHS of that somewhere.
Maybe again someday we can get more anime.
We should cover that for the podcast, too.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, honestly, I kind of wondered when this project first started if this was a precursor to some anime release, but no, I guess not.
Well, at least they're smart to give us more Dragon Quest stuff when all these games are coming out. We can extend our enjoyment by reading the manga.
Absolutely. It's always nice when the multimedia aspect of Japanese games actually makes it globally, as opposed to like Drakengard, where a bunch of the content of the game is actually across other media forms that aren't available globally.
Oh, that's rough.
It happens.
For Jennifer, what are your responsibilities when it comes to overseeing everyone's work, such as the translator, letterer, and designer?
Like I mentioned, in this case anyway, the editor is kind of like a project manager. So we hire the translator and letterer and yeah, are in contact with them the whole way. If there's questions or issues that come up with the translation process, making sure things stay on time, obviously making sure that the script is going to be like the type of format that the letterer needs. And guiding the letterer through any issues that come up. I mean, for this series, it's probably obvious, but these are older files, so you have some things, some complications that come up with that, and we kind of have to guide the lettering and design process through that. And I mean, there's a lot of file shuffling sometimes. In terms of design, I don't work directly with the freelance designers anymore. It's more handled through like our in-house design team deal directly with the freelance designer, but the editors definitely give a lot of context and comments for the design process and make sure everything's gonna make sense for the book and the story. And yeah, we just kind of do odds and ends throughout the whole process, really.
So who decides to keep in the Japanese sound effects, the bams, the crashes, the tum 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 tum? In the case of the Mark of Erdrick, the Japanese sound effects are kept in with the English translation on the side. Sometimes I've seen them replaced entirely, like they did with The Adventure of Dai, published by Viz, or even with Rooming with a Gamer Gal, also published by Square Enix, but for the Manga Up application. I guess it must be an individual editorial decision. Jennifer, would you have any insight on that?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's kind of up to each publisher's policy. Like our publishing policies and editorial style guide is obviously going to be different from Viz's or any other publishers. So that's the first thing. Like some publishers favor full retouch for the sound effects, some prefer the subtitles, sometimes with only English subtitles, sometimes even with Japanese and English subtitles for the sound effects. So yeah, it really just depends. For our imprint, Square Enix Manga and Books, we take kind of a hybrid approach where for the most part we use English subtitles for the sound effects. Sometimes sound effects are fully retouched. It also depends on the specific project, the specific book too. I have another series, Wash It All Away, where we're not fully retouching the art, which we normally would, but as far as the sound effects, the letter wanted to actually fully retouch the sound effects. So we're doing that for that series. But yeah, for most of our series, it's sort of a hybrid approach here.
And I like that because I like seeing the Japanese as well because you kind of get to see the art of that lettering of what they had originally, and then of course you get the English as well, so you can actually know what's going on.
Yeah, it's kind of more complicated than some people might think because the sound effects are intended to be part of the audio. It's not just a word, so you have to be cognizant of how it impacts everything that the reader experiences.
Right, right.
Yeah, I know for me, I mean, I'm like a baby compared to you ladies, but I can read hiragana and katakana. So when I'm reading the sound effects, then it has the English translation to the side. Or we say like clash, and they say do to do or whatever, So it's like they're so different that always throws me off a little bit. But yeah, it's that's a big logistical challenge, I'm sure. And just quick question: does it affect the budget whether you're retouching those or not? Or is that not something you could talk about?
I mean, we can't go into details of that, but it's more extensive work if you fully retouch things versus just subtitle things. So
Yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense.
that's going to impact the budget, and it's going to be definitely a consideration for publishers when they make some of these decisions.
Gotcha. That's what I had imagined. Were there any spirited debates between you two about how anything should be translated, or was it pretty straightforward?
Okay, Christina here. I'll say it's pretty straightforward, in my opinion. Like, when I coin a new name or a term, I will lay my reasoning out in notes in the translation document. I am open to overrides or things getting altered, but for this manga, there is already so much that's already solidified because it's an existing IP, so it doesn't actually come up as much as you might think.
Yeah, I remember I don't even remember what specifically, but we talked about some things, but like you said, with the existing IP, there weren't many things that you had to decide for yourself about the terms. And you have such a long history with this series for the most part. I trust your judgment on all of that. So it was a really, has been a really smooth process so far, I would say.
I'm doing my best to live up to that trust.
Doing a great job so far.
Now, Jennifer, can you tell us how many volumes of the Mark of Erdrick are in the initial plan of release? We saw that so far the first 3 volumes are available for pre-order.
Yeah, the plan is to release all 15 volumes of this perfect edition of the series. Of course, there can be delays and schedule changes, and we always try to, make readers aware of all of that. But yeah, the plan is to release this perfect edition, which is 15 volumes.
Fantastic.
We're looking forward to each and every one of those. Do you know if there will be a digital version of this as well? For example, The Adventure of Dai can be read digitally through an English Shonen Jump subscription. Rooming with a Gamer Gal can be read through the Square Enix Manga app. Will there be a similar option for this manga, or will it be strictly physical for now?
Well, there's a couple different options with digital releases. What you mentioned so far is some of the apps, but what we do at Square Enix Manga and Books is release a full volume, digital ebook for more or less all of our books that we publish. So this will also have an ebook version as well as the physical version. Just, I do want to mention, and I'm not just saying this, but it does help a little more if you are able to, if you can buy the physical version. The physical version is what helps the release more than the digitals. But, I understand not everybody can do that. But yeah, especially for, older, unexpected series like this, if you can buy the physical version, that'll be great for the series.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that there's both options, but yes, I would also recommend getting the physical edition. But then again, I'm a little bit older, so I'm kind of biased towards the physical editions myself. But that's good to hear. It supports the series a little bit more if you buy it physically. That makes sense.
Yeah, I also, you get new book smell. It's great. You
Mm.
get to touch the different textures on the book. Yeah, I get it.
And like you said, with the design, you get that nice little, the designs on the spine, so it kind of comes and gets you that whole image as you get to collect them. So it'll be fun to see as you get more and more more and more volumes of this.
For the record, that continuous art is from the original 21 volume release.
Yeah, forgot to mention that.
Love it, love it. So we want to keep this a spoiler-free podcast, but from this first volume, who would you say your favorite characters are and why? You can go with the protagonist, an antagonist, or both if you want. And Jennifer, will go with you first.
One of my favorite characters, I would say, comes up way later in the series. But in terms of the first volume, my favorite character has to be Luna Freya. She kind of becomes, I guess, she sort of becomes like an older sister or sort of surrogate parent for Prince Ars, but she also is this like mighty warrior. She trains these boys in swordsmanship, and she never backs down from a fight. Luna Freya is just this fearless protector, and I kind of aspire to be as brave as she is. So yeah, I think Luna Freya is really cool.
What about you, Christina?
I've got to go with the Dragon Lord. I love the Dragon Lord. He's so hammy. And he talks to people on this weird, like, rotary phone looking idol thing that looks like an idol of Malroth from Dragon Quest II.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And so, like, you'll see it, like, start flashing and go, hey, is anyone there? And it'll be like, babe, wake up, your Malroth rotary phone's ringing.
Yeah, there's a scene in the first volume where there's a certain character who gets called upon, and the Dragon Lord is like, what took you so long?" And he's like, I'm sorry. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and hey, that was fancy technology back in 1991.
True.
We're sort of mentioning some of the humor, I guess, too. And of course, in classic Dragon Quest style, the series does have a lot of nice, funny elements, too. I love the scene in this first volume where one of these little boys kind of gets a comeuppance by a group of slimes, which is
Oh, yeah, I love the slime scene.
it's so funny. This kid is so confident. He's like, oh, it's slimes. Easy. No, not easy.
Oh yeah, that's great. And it's very interesting to see some of the modern references that are thrown in too. I won't say what specifically as to not spoil it for the readers, but just like you might see in some past Dragon Quest games, there's this one scene in the first volume where there's this one enemy monster that goes up into the clouds and references a certain superhero. And I was shocked to see that. I was like, oh, okay. Gonna get some modern humor in here. Got it.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. There's going to be a scene in a future volume where a character makes a pose that looks identical to a Street Fighter character. And it turns out that the Street Fighter pose was actually based on that manga pose and not the other way around.
Oh, wow. That'll be so interesting when I get to that volume. That's great. I love that piece of trivia.
It's wild.
There's lots of little secrets in this series, like more, references to the games, and if you're a long-term fan, there's things where you go, "Oh, I get this." Yes.
So, having read this first volume, I'm just really impressed by the great work you both did, and I'm impressed by the story. It kind of reminds me of Willow, like the beginning of it. It has some parallels to the movie Willow, and it's mostly serious and highly engaging, but then it's funny too. Anyway, both of you, what do we have to look forward to by reading this title, Christina?
Okay, so the things I would say I look forward to, I am really looking forward to the Eliahan arc. The Eliahan arc is like this game takes place, this story takes place 100 years after the game Dragon Quest III. So you get to revisit a lot of locations from that game, and some of them are pretty much the same as you remember. Some of them are very different. It's been 100 years. People have had time to, grow. But Eliahan has a lot of like really cool, distinctive buildings that you will recognize and go in and look at and go, oh man, I know that place.
That's cool. What about you, Jennifer?
I really, like I mentioned before, one thing I really love is the art. Kamui Fujiwara has really cool art throughout the series, but especially in certain climactic moments. So it's really, visually exciting to read. But I also really love just the character arcs. There's really great characters in this series, and watching them change over time and become, members of the party, but also just change as humans throughout the story. You don't always get that, so I just like watching the progression of things and how it all comes together in the end.
Great answers. That's all for this episode of Slime Time. We'd like to sincerely thank Jennifer Sherman and Christina Rose for joining us on this episode. It's always a huge pleasure to talk to somebody who's worked on something that we enjoy so much, like this manga. And we're not just saying that, we really do love it. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks so much for having us. If you want to chat about it, you can find me, on Blue Sky or the Bird site. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about this series anytime.
And thank you too, Christina.
Thank you. It has been a real trip down memory lane doing this series and coming back to this fandom once again. It's really fun to be back.
Yes, thanks so much to both of you. I've read the first volume myself, and it's very exciting. So I recommend it to anyone who's a fan of Dragon Quest in general to go ahead and check out this manga. So we're a non-profit podcast. We won't mistranslate your hard-earned gold when we can offer you quality content for free. But if you do have some extra gold that's just completely burning a hole in your wallet, pouch, bottomless bag, hanging wall sack, or treasure chest, and you would like to donate anything to a website that's been supporting Dragon Quest fans for over 25 years, stop by the Dragon's Den by clicking the link in the show notes. There are several ways to support the Den, including the affiliate links that don't cost you anything extra when making other Dragon Quest purchases, especially the upcoming Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake, the new upcoming manga volumes of The Adventure of Dai, and of course, the Mark of Erdrick manga. Volume 1 officially drops 23 September, and you can pre-order Volume 2 and 3 as well as of when we recorded this podcast.
We have multiple Slime Time t-shirt options that were designed by our resident artist, Dwayne. See the link for them in the show notes.
You can direct comments or questions for the podcast on X, Blue Sky, and Instagram at DQ Slime Time.
And you can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/EastXTwitch. Come watch me play a variety of games every Saturday, kids.
Join in tons of Dragon Quest discussion at the Dragon's Den forums or Discord, the Dragon Questers and Slime Time groups on Facebook, and the brand new Dragon Questers Discord.
We'd like to thank everyone that made this podcast possible, including Woodus, the Dragon's Den, Silver Alpha Lion for hooking us up with copies of the Mark of Erdrick from the LA pop-up shop, and especially the hardworking translators and editors of manga everywhere. You're doing the work of Rubus.
Please like, subscribe, and write a review for the podcast.
Dragon Quest Slime Time, sliming off!
This is Gertrude for Slime Time, reminding you all that you must complete your adventure.